Hey guys, Dre here with another video for you, and I wish I was bringing you this under nicer circumstances, but here we are, unfortunately. In case you haven't seen the news already, at about 1:30 a.m. this morning, it was reported, I think the Mirror were first to report it, that Niki Lauda had tragically lost his life at the age of 70. This morning, I hear he was in hospital on dialysis due to kidneys. I mean, to be fair, he'd had a couple of health-related problems and scares. He had a lung transplant a couple of years ago, and he's had some problems, but it doesn't make it any easier to deal with when you finally hear the news that he's gone. And it's always going to be hard for me, a 26-year-old millennial, to talk about Niki Lauda in the context when you weren't there, but I will do my very best to do this justice, because I like talking about people like this, because I like to appreciate legends and what they leave behind, and it's not the first time I've had to do this. I had to do this when Nicky Hayden passed away, and it doesn't get any easier, but I will try my very best. I mean, I'm a numbers guy, so let's get them out of the way real quick. A three-time world champion in Formula 1 in 75, 77 and 84. 25 career wins, good for 9th on the all-time list, tied with another legend in Jim Clark, also sadly no longer with us. And it reminds me a lot of Steve Davis, and in the sense of, yeah, Steve was a 6-time world snooker champion, but we always know him a little bit more, I think, for the one he lost rather than the 6 he won, because of that epic black ball final that went to the last frame against Dennis Taylor. I think it's quite similar here with Lauda. Yeah, we talk about it, his brilliance and his 3 championships, but I think we talk most about that epic 76 season. Now, I'm not going to talk about it too much because we all know the story. But of course, the awful Nürburgring accident, the one that very nearly took his life, the fact he was read the last rites, thinking he wasn't going to make it, slipped into a coma off that awful fire. They were trying to pump his lungs out with all those toxic fumes that are inside, and he should have died on the table that day, for all accounts. But somehow he was back in a race car just 2 rounds later, utterly petrified, but still determined to try and win a championship. It's an unbelievable story in that, he had burns to the head. He lost most of his right ear, the hair on the right side of his head, his eyebrows, his eyelids. He couldn't race on that season finale in Japan because the rain combined with his tear ducts being damaged. He couldn't stop crying, obviously not in the more emotions, but in the physical sense, and the fact he could barely see, just, I know people talk about Tiger Woods and the greatest sporting comebacks ever when he won the Masters a couple of months ago, but for me, that's the greatest sporting comeback ever. Like, in terms of sheer bravery and determination and fighting spirit, I don't think we'll ever see the likes of someone like Niki Lauda again in the context of motorsport, in sport in general. I think that's why he was so transcendent, was due to just his bravery, his commitment and his determination, something that we, I think, often admire most about these Formula 1 drivers. I mean, as I've always said, it's always going to be a sport of engineering first and foremost, but we as fans, as consumers of sport and fans, we will always be most taken aback by the driver and the humanity of it, and nothing spoke about the humanity of Formula 1, I think, quite like Niki Lauda did. And it's funny we mentioned Japan. I arguably think that was him not racing for a championship. I mean, the thing we put above it more than anything else in Formula 1. We've seen drivers live and die trying to win this championship, who are willing to risk their own lives or others for that sheer determination of trying to win. Niki was willing to cough that up for the sake of the greater good. And I'd argue that's just as brave, if not braver, than anything he actually did behind the wheel of a car. Because, man, 99.9% of people ever would never do something like that. He's a remarkable human being, and I as a Brit, I will always admire the most that he was honest, that he was no nonsense. He never spared you from bullshit. He would give you his opinion, whether you liked it or not. He would give you both barrels, and he was always, unrepentant in that regard. And we Brits, we love someone like that. We love honesty. We love no nonsense. He knew the risk. He was candid about the risk. I think that humanized him even more. And I also admire the fact he knew his worth. He came back to F1 in '82, demanded a king's ransom out of McLaren to come back. He knew his worth. He knew what it would mean to him. He knew what. He knew he wanted to be paid fairly for the fact there'd be a 20% chance he'd die every time he stepped into an F1 car, and he wanted to be compensated for it. We talk about these drivers like Hamilton making 40-50 million a year now. A lot of that comes down to what we saw in the past, and guys like Niki, whose drivers were like, you know what, no, I'm going to negotiate my salary and I'm going to demand I get paid this much because I'm doing this job. And it's great, and it's admirable, and I love that. I love that, and I always will love that about Niki more than anything else. And like I said, he was more than just an F1 driver. His influence in aviation was also huge. I mean, if you've not seen the story that I think Maurice Hamilton, the F1 journalist, put up, I think on The Guardian, about obviously the tragedy of the Lauda Air Flight 004 in '91, and the determination he had to try and salvage his airline, his reputation, and realise no, it wasn't the fault of the crew and the airline itself. It was a manufacturing fault with the plane. He said himself it was the darkest period in his life, and the fact he came back from that. There's many a story that's going to come out with Lauda, of course. In sadly, unfortunately, sometimes death brings this out of people, in a good and in a bad way. And one more thing before I get out of here as well is that if you've not seen Rush, go out of your way to see it. I love Rush. It's one of my favourite motorsport movies ever, and I love the ending of that movie more than anything else. Again, we all know the story if you're a motorsport fan, but I love the relationship that he had with James Hunt. People used to think they hated each other. They didn't. They had the most respect for each other. They were friends off the track. But what I loved about it most was that Hunt and Lauda brought the best out of each other as people. I loved that Hunt was this maverick renegade figure that loved the finer things in life outside of driving a race car. He was, the picture boy for that pretty boy gentleman driver. The women, the drink, the smoking, all the vices that came with being a top tier F1 driver and the access that gave you. But I love that Lauda brought out the competitive side and the talent that Hunt had always had behind the wheel of an F1 car. In the same way that I love that Hunt's life brought something out of Niki, in that it made him realise there's more to life than sport, and that it made him a better human being and one that enjoyed life a little bit more thanks to him, rather than just talking about an F1 car and the numbers behind it. There was more to it than that, and that's another thing I always admire. But he's gone at the age of 70. Rest in power, Niki. Thank you for everything you've done for Formula One. Thank you for being the human image and the embodiment of this sport, of safety, and being that human side that I think this sport often lacks so much, that I think we need more than ever in a changing society. We miss you, Niki, and thank you.